Hi there, this is Stephen from the podcast Who Am I? Just a sensitivity warning, today's subject is very complex and can be very difficult at times to talk about and to hear about. If you're not feeling in the right frame of mind to listen to a discussion obviously about depression, then we encourage you to just wait until you feel you are. Also, we have a few technical issues where the screen freezes a few times, just, technology the way it is. So bear with us and I hope you enjoy the podcast. And today's episode is going to be discussing mental health and how it affects us sort of personally and just in day-to-day life. So we'll start the discussion off just by really talking about our own experiences.
We've both had plenty of experiences over the years. This is the type of thing that can last half a lifetime or more, I don't know.
It often feels like several lifetimes, doesn't it?
Yeah, it can make things harder to go through. But we also want to get to the positives because there are some. I think everyone has hard things in their life. And for some people, or for a lot of people, it's mental illness. I think more people than we often realize are affected because it's something that everyone likes to keep quiet. There's this expectation for us to be always in a good mood, always approachable, always ready to talk to people, ready to work, always have enough energy. At least that's what it can feel like when those things are no longer available.
There is a lot of expectation. And I find it very strange. Like I've always been confused by this measurement of ability for us to either again work or do things is measured by the person or people that can do the most. So for example, if someone can work for 12 hours or go running for ages, actually it's more of the work stuff, then everyone else is expected to be the same. But biologically, we're all so different. We're all so the variation is unreal. And therefore, why do we expect that everyone's going to be able to measure up to the same high standard? It's very strange. I've always been fascinated by that. And it always affects, I always, again, get confused because not everyone can do exactly the same as everyone else.
Yeah. Maybe schooling is a big factor, that we all get graded the same way.
Yeah, that's true.
But then some differences are made. Like some schools will be more okay with someone having dyslexia, for example, and then treat them slightly different in how they're graded or what courses they go to. So there's some
there's progress.
Yeah, there's some adaptability there, but yeah, it's difficult. And another reason you just reminded me of is usually the younger we are, the more simplistic our worldview is, and we keep learning. Especially when we're small children, we just soak up a lot of knowledge about the world. We're a big sponge, and then if we keep it up, if we do the work, we can keep adaptable and change our perspective of the world and how it works, how other people work. And that helps keep down the expectations we have for other people and probably ourselves as well. It would be nice to treat everyone individually, but we always make rules, abstractions away from the reality. We create this model in our mind of the world and of what people are, and sometimes that then creates an expectation for everyone to be the pattern that you have built in your mind.
Yeah. And mental health just defies all that patterns and expectations and whatever, because again, it's so different from each individual, person to person. And we'll have, we can have similar, we can bracket it under depression or anxiety or OCD or bipolar. There's like many different things, but again, quantifying it from individual to individual is very difficult because
Yeah,
again, we're all very different.
the science is still pretty young. A doctor does not have a lot of symptoms to go on. There are tests with what are they called? Those things stuck to your head for
Oh, like
for an elect
Medusa.
hmm?
Uh,
for an EEG, for
nodes.
example,
Yeah, yeah,
and that way they can measure epilepsy. But yeah, a lot of things cannot be measured materially, objectively, and so there are surveys, there are forms that where you can fill in your personal perspective of what you're going through, and that might
yeah,
help, but it is subjective.
yeah,
um, I don't know. Just personally, when I get to know someone after a while, I will pick up on some things that I associate with depression or, I don't know, isolation. All these small signals that you notice after a while, especially
yeah,
when you've been, dealing with the matter yourself or with someone close to you from day to day, and then you become more adept at picking up on those signals. And I think that's one of the most sure ways to know what someone is going through from the outside.
yeah. It's difficult to notice a shift sometimes when you're around people that have depression. For example, when it gets you just used to it, and if they take a bit of a dive and feel worse, then it's hard to notice because you're kind of like, okay, it's depression. They've been getting through it. It becomes normal. But the examples of like Robin Williams and Chester Bennington, who's a lead singer for Linkin Park, who was the lead singer for Linkin Park, they were known to have depression in their personal lives and their families, and they brought joy and laughter and goodness to people's lives. But on the surface, they showed all that happiness and everything, but inside, they obviously were really suffering and in turmoil, and led to obviously their taking their own lives. And it's difficult to notice when, if you're around it a lot, people take that dip a bit. So again, that measurement, going back to the point, is that measurement is very difficult. It's again, as you say, it's a personal thing that each individual has, and it's not like it's still a physical thing in many ways, but it's not like a broken leg or like a lot of classed as physical conditions that are easily defined.
Yeah, I imagine someday we will be better at physically telling the symptoms. Brain chemistry is not yet well researched, but we have some theories about neuro. What are they called?
Neuroscience, I guess.
No, the receptors.
Oh, okay.
The gap where serotonin jumps from one
Neurons.
cell to another. I don't know. Yeah, we have some knowledge, some theoretical models of the activity between neurons, the serotonin, and the other things that jump from cell to cell. But it is hard to measure and not clear how to classify someone's condition from that. But we wanted to get more into the emotional, social, everyday part of it anyway.
Yeah.
Um,
I have a little
how,
question for you.
yeah,
It's
go on.
okay. I guess, when did you first realize that you were struggling with depression? If that's too personal or not, but
Hmm, that's fine. It's really difficult. Well, it was really difficult for me to judge when I was depressed uh, because I was so used to it. I thought it was the
yeah,
normal thing. It was just
that's
maybe obvious that I was not as physically active as others, not as excitable by sports or food. things that give you excitement in general for
Yeah.
people. But I think you have to really hit some wall before you can be sure that you're going through uh, a mental illness condition.
Yeah.
And I think that was when I was 10 for the first time, when my family moved to England, and it was really difficult for me to adapt. I did find friends, I could speak the language, but I missed a lot of things about Germany, and it just made me more sad than it should, or than you would expect.
It's a
But
big change. Yeah.
yeah, but I adapted, and it was fine for a while. And then again, when I was 14 or 15, I noticed that some little things that people do bother me. And then someone who I spoke to just voluntarily helped me and my parents to recognize that it's OCD.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we kind of managed. I didn't feel comfortable with therapy, so we left it. And then it came back at a later age. And so it went in cycles like that. But every
Yeah.
time it got worse until I really could not do any work, could not focus on anything, some days could not get out of bed. Then it becomes really clear.
Yeah. That's the point where it becomes obvious, isn't it?
Was it similar for you that it was really a shock or a surprise?
Yeah, it's again, as you say, it's hard to sort of pinpoint, but like, so as a child, I was happy-go-lucky. Like, I was literally like known for being a bit of a hurricane of just playing football, running around, reading an odd book here and there, but just being, I guess, what you'd call, again, I hate the word, but normal, active child. But then when I hit my sort of, hit puberty at 12, 13, I just noticed that there was a massive sort of dip in just um ability. Well, it was just, again, it was just like, so it was, I guess, highs and lows. So I'd be happy about something, and then the next day I would just literally want to die. Like the compulsion to just end my life would just kick in. It's almost like this constantly depressive thoughts of what's the point, um the world's so cruel, blah blah blah, like stuff that just would be depressive. um and I think, I struggle to relate, I guess, like all teenagers, probably all humans, to a lot of things, and it just left me feeling very lonely, like super alone. Um, and I think I turned to music for my sort of to get help me get through things. So I think, yeah, I think about, to answer the question, I think about, yeah, 12, 13, sort of maybe 14, I realized that there was definitely um, a depression. Um, but I think I hid it pretty well as well, because again, we get used to masks, we put on our masks. So I think it was obvious that I was into, again, rock music, metal music, these kind of things that people associate with often, I guess, being depressed, but sort of normal society associated with that. But that made me happy. Like, this is the interesting thing, is that because the music was relatable to, I didn't feel so alone. So therefore, um, I actually felt happier because of that. Um,
Was it about the lyrics or kind of the
yeah,
rebellious tone?
yeah, like, get deeper thinking. So a lot of the, I guess, pop music is very shallow. So then I like found my big brother. As typical cliche, big brother gives you puts on music and it becomes your sort of go-to. And yeah, it was Metallica, Offspring, Slipknot at the time, Linkin Park, and it was just a Korn, and they were just bands that would just, again, I was into extreme things, so I enjoyed the heaviness. It was so different to what I was used to. But as you say, the lyrics were just, they were things that, um, yeah, often just made me feel the emotion in a relatable way. So I'd feel depressed. They would talk about depression, or they'd talk about suicide, or they'd talk about being angry. And it's just things that I was like, okay, that's how I feel. I didn't have anyone I could talk to about it.
That makes
Um,
sense. Yeah.
so I guess, yeah, that was the point. and then you get again in a weird way. I got used to it. I started to understand the depressive spell. So if I was feeling or um, very depressed, I just knew that's what was happening, and I guess pushed through it, and it became the normal. It became just part of my everyday life. Um, and again, most people would be like, "Oh, I didn't realize you were so like." If I talked about it to someone, oh, we had no idea. We know you listen, like we know you project the rebellious um, surface image, but you're always so happy and look so positive. And it's amazing that you can project that on the surface, but inside be like so just in oblivion and turmoil and feel hopeless, I guess, because that's again what depression can be.
Yeah,
Can
it can
affect that.
isolate you um, because you might feel that you're the only one going through this, or that there's something wrong with you, and then you can feel ashamed for it. And so I enjoyed going to groups who share this. I don't think they were always available, but in my late 20s, I found a group that helped me like that. Or I've also done a bit of group therapy, and that's helpful because everyone is different in how they experience mental illness, but there is more of an understanding and less prejudice and expectation for you. So that's kind of a
Well, the
unique.
emotion is the same.
Say again?
The emotion is the same. So even though the circumstances around things may be different, often it's the thing that links us is being able to meet people that can relate and understand to a degree the emotions we're going through. Often I found, and I think I've talked about this before in the podcast, but often uh, you get people that say, "Oh, you can never say you understand." In a therapy situation, the therapist should never say they understand because they don't. And it's like, well, actually, no, they may understand the emotional side of it. They may not understand the circumstances. And when I've been talking to friends and stuff, it's when if they're having struggles, and I like turn to them and talk and say, like, no, I understand the emotion and how that's going through. They feel less alone. It's a very important thing to feel less alone. Feeling alone is one of the biggest sort of triggers or struggles with any mental health thing. And the moment you kind of get a sense of not being alone, I think it takes a bit of a weight off. So you finding a group that you can actually, chat to and stuff is wonderful to be able to help.
Yeah, you did mention that about empathy and being able to feel what other people are feeling, even though you might not be in the exact same circumstances as them in a previous episode. But the emotions that come with mental illness can be different or more intense in a way.
Yeah, very
So,
complex.
what words can you use to describe them? I mean, the word depression gets misused a lot. Like, oh, I was so
Yeah.
depressed all day, but now I'm fine. Um, that could be real depression, but often people just use it for when they're down a bit, when they're disappointed. So,
Yeah.
but there is a medical use, obviously.
Yeah. Again, the measurement. So when does it turn from being
Yeah.
um, down and um, feeling unhappy to then being depressed? That's the difficult way of that doctors struggle with, I guess, to try and measure
Yeah,
and to know.
I find it to be literally depressive sometimes in the sense that there's something pressing, there's a pressure in my head. And I don't know how that works physically. If there is air pressure, if there's blood pressure, I don't know. What other things there could be. There's some electrical phenomenon
Working.
going on,
Yeah.
but it also manifests in my shoulders. So the feeling of there being a burden on my shoulders, I guess, comes from the tension in my shoulders when I'm trying to protect myself metaphorically, as though there were someone chasing me with a stick or something.
Yeah.
Maybe that's some instinct we have when we feel endangered, threatened. So that's another word I like to use to describe how I feel. And then just lots of irrational thoughts, including fears of dying. I think that's a common one, or going to
Yeah.
hell if if you're raised in a religion.
Yeah.
Just these worst fears that you have, that you might experience in your nightmares, will appear so much more realistic and
Yeah.
immediate.
No, definitely they do. Again, you just feel overburdened by everything. Like everything manifests itself a lot stronger, as you say. And I think motivation is one as well. Like to be able to
Hmm.
actually do things becomes very difficult. Even simple tasks um, become like that's a clear sign, I think, that you're struggling with depression. Because again, a lot of people don't realize this is the thing is a lot of people go through depression and they kind of just push through and push through, even though things are a lot harder. It takes them a while to realize what's actually going on, and so it's important to try and make people aware. I guess mainstream culture, what these things are, so they can actually receive the help.
Yeah,
Um,
I found that I'm afraid of disappointing someone, say an employer or a parent, and then I will try to hide my feelings because of that, because I want to fulfill the expectations the other person has. Um, but the paradox thing is that they're actually more prepared than you think to be understanding, even if they may not have gone through anything similar personally, but to just treat you more carefully,
yeah,
more respectfully. I think people are capable of being careful and friendly if they know that there's a need. But first, you need to tell them because, like you said earlier, a lot of us hide what we're going through and do so successfully.
mhm.
A therapist will probably pick up on these signals a lot quicker, but
Well, the
yeah.
depression itself makes it feel like you can't tell people. So
Hmm.
you feel like a weakness or that you're not good enough or that you're failing, and therefore you don't because you think you're going to be judged and think that you'll be letting them down, as you say, disappoint them and stuff. When, as you say, it's quite the opposite. Often people are willing to help because they care for you and want what's best for you. But it's hard to take that first step. That first step is quite difficult.
And the opposite can happen too, that someone wants to help you, but since they don't know what you
Very true.
need, what would actually help you, they're very likely to do something that is not helpful, that could even be counterproductive, and put more pressure on you. And then all you want is distance from that person.
Yeah.
So, but then if you're the affected one, you often don't know yourself what you need. And so the common thing for me is just rest. Just leave me alone and let me sleep, and then I'll be better afterwards, more approachable,
Yeah.
more in a better mood. But when it's a person I see regularly, maybe I can figure out something with them where I can say I'm in a bad mood or I'm having one of those days, and then they know how to treat me differently. But that's something that takes time and that you just need to figure
Yeah.
out.
Well, people tend to be one or two things. They tend to be fixers or listeners.
Mm.
So one person tends to just listen and let like someone talk and work through it themselves, and then other people tend to want to just like be proactive, give you the advice that may or may not help or be worse or actually might be the right thing. But again, it all depends on the individual and the conversation going on and that kind of stuff. But that tends to be what I found. Um, and at any given time, it could be the right or wrong thing. It's so
Mm.
difficult. So one person that you're talking to that maybe has depression or anxiety or OCD Again, OCD is a bit more complex in terms of trying to find things to help and assist with it. But with depression and anxiety, there are many ways, like both medication or um, cognitive behavioral therapy and different therapies that can assist. And it's trying to be able to talk when you're talking to an individual, signpost them, I guess. Listen, obviously, but do both, I guess. Listen, make sure they know that they're cared for, and it's going to that they're not just being brushed aside as, oh, just get over it, get on with it, because that's an attitude that happens. And then signposted, I guess, to, again, doctors, different things. Again, meditation's one that happens a lot these days. Talk about mindfulness, these kind of things.
Yeah, there's no shame in going to a regular general practitioner or a psychotherapist just to figure out if you are dealing with such a condition, so that you can give it the proper attention. Another method that I like to use is reading self-help books. They may not answer every question you have. Obviously, you kind of have a dialogue with them, like with a doctor. But for me, I love to absorb information and learn a lot. So it's a good way for me to reduce that uncertainty and that I don't know, feeling of being overwhelmed. So yeah, a combination of medicine, therapy, and books and meditation, and it is good. A combination is usually better than any of them by themselves.
Yeah.
And what has been bad for your healing process? One thing I can think of, and that also others have told me, is trying to search the internet for advice by other people who have been through something similar, non-professionals. Have you done that before?
Yeah, a little bit. I've been quite lucky to find people that actually I can just chat to, and again, the internet's a strange, interesting one, because again, it tends to just be messaging. So often that works for people, often messaging backwards and forwards. I know there are a lot of communities where it can help. Often can do the opposite, and it just becomes a cesspool of people feeding off each other's depression rather than helping each other's. That can happen.
Or
But I've been very lucky to
one
find people like.
one way how it
Sorry,
can
go on.
backfire also is when you ask or when you read online about different medicines and
Oh,
how
okay, yeah.
people have experienced them, and they'll tell you their most terrible experiences, and you don't read all the good experiences that happen to people. They're less likely to be there in
Yeah.
the same thread or website, and so you will become afraid of medicine, or at least there's a tendency for that.
I was always that way. Like, again, kind of a bit of a jump back a little bit away from the, I guess, discussions of things. But medicine was always something that, like medication, was always something that I didn't want. And whenever I did try it, it didn't work. So, I mean, my first experience, I think, was my first year at university. I was having massive depression, and they put me on basic medication, and didn't do anything. Like, it just didn't help. So that immediate response in my brain was, well, medication doesn't help. What's the point? And just left it. And then over the years, tried different ones, still didn't help. And yet now I found the right one, and it helps, and it keeps a lot of the anxiety sort of quieter. It doesn't, it hasn't fixed it in terms of made it go away, but it's manageable, and it allows me to function relatively well. And not be overburdened by the depression. As I say, it's like a dial down. It quietens the thoughts, compulsions, whatever you want to call it. And now I'm constantly being like, okay, keep trying with the medication. Like, be careful, because again, they can have extreme effects. I've had situations where, again, there's been a lot of negative side effects with other medication. But once that happens, stop. Like, go to the doctor, make sure you balance it all, and then maybe try something else, because there are plenty out there, and some work for some people and some don't work for others.
It can be
Yeah.
frustrating how much time this process takes.
Yes.
I know of someone who had to try several different uh, medications. I think there were SSRIs,
Yeah. That's
selective
one.
serotonin reuptake inhibitors, um, and there's a wide variety. So that's it's a good thing. So that hopefully there's something there for you. But it also means that you might have to go through several before you find the one that works for you, and you might have to go through a painful phase because of all the side effects that often come with them. So this friend had to try several different SSRIs until he stopped puking, for example. uh,
Oh yeah.
I mean, I had stomach cramps the first 3 weeks that I took my medicine, but after that, yeah, yeah, even in the nights sometimes. But after that, I finally, after 3 weeks, I felt some of the good effects, which was similar to what you described. That my brain became more flexible and then more amenable to psychotherapy and self-analysis. Um, because it's common for your thoughts to go around in circles and never reach any conclusion.
Yeah. One thing that I guess, away from medication that I find that helps is distraction. Like if we jump to anxiety, for example, um, as a mental health condition, that when say examples, a panic attack kicks in, because I've had to deal with that for a number of years as well in my life, um, the fear response kicks in, and it can kick in straight away, and you have a massive fight or flight response, and you feel like you're dying, like it's like a heart condition where your body just goes into absolute panic mode. But if sometimes it's gradual, you can feel it coming on, and often your brain just needs to be distracted so that it can calm down and move away from the anxiety. And I do that um, with a lot of people, like a few friends that have anxiety. So when they know it's kicking in and stuff, we just go online and play computer games. Like it literally just causes them to be distracted enough to settle the coming on panic attack. Again, that's hard to do when you're out and about, for example, if you're in a situation in the community. But there are psychotherapies, there are ways to push against anxiety. So, not to, I guess, a personal example is I really had to push against the, I guess, connections in my brain that were triggering panic attacks, like the no confidence, scared to go outside, scared to be around people. All those fear patterns had been developed over the course of a year or two. And then I had to, again, it's a personal experience and it may help some people, it may not help others. I pushed myself to slowly go out in my own time, little baby steps. Went to a board games group, got to know a few people, and over the course of months and years, gained loads of confidence. I guess I call it deprogramming. Deprogrammed it, broke those patterns in my brain of being afraid. I still get every so often still get a little bit nervous, a little bit anxious, but I just go, well, I've come this far. I've done the hard work as such, and push through. Maintains it. I think a lot of times fear response, if we listen to them, they get stronger and stronger. I think. Again, my own sort of understanding of it. So let's say we go out, there's loud noises that we don't like. If we go away from them straight away, the brain then strengthens that thought that every time there's a loud noise, we
Mhm.
must run away from it. I don't know what your sort of views are, if you've experienced anxiety like that before or anything like that.
Well, yeah, I recognize the concepts you're talking about. I have other triggers that are, I don't know, sometimes just even inside my head, not even something from the
What is it? Yeah,
outside, but it's a
the
mix of
thought.
both. And
Yeah,
yeah, the fight or flight response kicks in because your brain associates something with an actual threat for your life.
And as you say, it could just literally be a thought. It could be a thought about
Yeah,
something. It doesn't have to be an outside response. That's often the case with anxiety. It's in your mind
right.
has a thought,
And then when you do flee the situation, like you said, avoiding that noise, for example,
which
then
makes perfect sense.
yeah,
You know, to run away from it, it makes sense to do that.
but you confirm the bias, and so you strengthen the anxiety. And the opposite is confrontation. And I remember when I first could no longer work because of anxiety, I said, I will no way will I ever try confrontation therapy. But then with time, several years time, I realized that it's not just the most effective treatment. It's might even be the only effective treatment for me. We said medicine can alter your brain, but it's not a solution. It's just something that will make it more changeable. But as soon as you stop the medication, you will pretty much go back to the way you were before, maybe even worse, unless you did something in the meantime. Working with someone,
Yeah,
working by yourself, but changing your thought patterns, your beliefs. And by beliefs, I mean psychological beliefs, not necessarily religious beliefs. All those misconceptions about what is actually a threat.
yeah, I would agree. Well, again, this is our experiences, so there might be other people might have different opinions,
Sure.
but I would totally agree that the only thing that I found to help is a bit of medication that gives you a bit of armor, and then going and doing. You have to just act. You have to find a way, whether again it's through mindfulness, whether it's through as a vet. Again, we could do all these different things. You don't have to just pick one. But as you say, the exposure. I guess I call it exposure therapy. You called it what? Confrontation therapy. I don't know what the actual definitions
I
are.
know why. No, you're right. You have the official name, and I
Is that what it is?
translated it
Okay.
straight from German.
Okay. Again, I don't. The thing is, promise is I don't read. I don't tend. I just listen to some things from time to time and just pick up on terminology, but I don't focus on if it's the right terminology or not. So to me, exposure therapy kind of makes sense. If that's
Mhm.
what it is, then that's lucky that that's what it's called. Um, and yeah, and again, it's all in our own time, in our own space, like our own, as I say, baby steps is what I always say to people.
Yeah.
If you start to feel a bit anxious, then okay, see how it goes. Don't immediately run away. See how it goes. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's your brain. Then, if you tell yourself that's a success, that you've stayed for longer than maybe you would have, affirm that success, go away from the situation and be like, yeah, well done. I made it today. I made it this far. And then the next day or in a week or whatever, see if you can do it again. And then go, yeah, well done, success. It doesn't have to constantly be pushing forwards until you're ready.
Yeah.
There was many what could be classed as failures on my part. Like I would go to the board game group, have a massive panic attack, go home, and be crying and like chest wanting to explode or feeling like it's going to explode, and all that kind of panic attack stuff. But I would tell myself over and over again that you did it, you went there. Like that it was a massive thing, and that itself really helped to over time make it a lot easier because I didn't focus on it was a failure because it could be measured as failure if that's the way you view it. I didn't actually stay for the whole thing, but because I measured it as a success, that I actually got there. I left the house, even though I had to come home. Because I measured it as a success, it changed it in my brain to be okay.
Yep. That's true. Something that can also help with this method is making notes of various signals. So one thing I would write in that situation is I made it to the group.
Yeah.
Um, and then you could also measure how many minutes you managed to be there until you felt you had to go. You can write about other things you could measure, preferably in a quantitative way. So, how many hours I spent in bed today, or how many emails or phone calls I managed to do this week, things like that. Because that way you can objectively see your development over days and weeks. And
Yes.
if you don't, you might go through something that I did over and over, and that was the negative filter. That whenever you look back, when you're depressed and look back into your
Okay.
past, you
Yeah.
only remember the bad things. When you look forward into your future, you're pessimistic. So that's something that depression usually does for you. But then when someone tells you, but no, think of all these great things that you've done or experienced, all these reasons to be happy, it doesn't, it's not convincing. But if it
No.
comes from yourself in the form of a diary, maybe, then you can't argue with that.
Yeah, it's a very good way. Yeah, I like that. That's good. No, I've never used that, but that's a very, very sensible way to.
There are even
Uh,
apps that will help
yeah,
you, remind you, and ask you these questions about how bad, or from a scale from 1 to 10, how bad was your anxiety today, stuff like that.
yeah.
So there are ways to help yourself. Um,
Because again,
Go ahead.
sorry, depression and stuff and anxiety and all that, it takes away hope often. It gives despair, but it's realizing that there is hope. Like there are ways to get through this. Like that's the sort of message I try to tell people. Is again, it may not feel that way because again, it's one of the most patronizing things to say when you're going through depression. Is that, oh, it'll be okay. And you're like, at the time, it feels like nothing ever is going to be okay.
Hmm.
But it's like, I think if it's repeated enough, I think it does kind of like hit the subconscious a little bit maybe and help hopefully. But just that through my own experiences that um yeah um getting there again, it's tough, but it's so much better than what it was, and there is so much hope for the future. um Again, as I guess as culture starts to understand it more as well, because again we're going through a process of understanding within mainstream culture. um and another celebrity passed away recently, um Caroline Flack. Did like reality TV shows and stuff,
Hmm.
and there's been a massive movement because obviously she had like the depression and took her life, and to try and stop the media and paparazzis being so cruel and in, uh, invasive. Is that the right word? Like just getting into people's private lives and stuff. And there's a lot of legislation trying to move forward, I think, hopefully soon, to make that a thing. So it's
Is
so
this in the
sad that
UK?
it has. Yeah, in the UK, it's so
Hmm.
sad that it has to be like the catalyst is something so sad as the loss of a life. I wish we could go through these experience. Like again, I wish mainstream culture would figure it out without all this loss. But it seems to be the way that these things go at the moment. It takes these things to move the understanding forward or get it into mainstream. That actually we can change things and we can get better, and we can help others. Because again, a lot of the experience we go through, we'll go through it. Somebody will help us, or things will help us, and then we'll meet somebody else that's going through a similar situation we used to go through, or are currently going through, and the wisdom that we have gained can be passed on.
Yeah. I remember being afraid of speaking to anyone because of some negative experiences I had. And then when someone did treat me with enough respect and just, humility, not believing that they could do for me what I couldn't, I slowly realized, okay, it's not as dangerous as I thought to put myself out there. Um, our listeners can probably tell that we have come a long way since we're able to speak in this way at all. This wouldn't have been
Yeah.
possible several years ago for me, or just a few years. So, do you ever get angry when you look back and think, oh, so many years of my life were stolen? Um, or do you somehow manage to incorporate your experiences in your life and your story, your identity?
There are times when I get angry. There are times when like I get frustrated and wish that things could have been different. But there are just little moments of again the depression or like feeling extra down. Majority of the time, I see it as a positive that I've been through these experiences. Again, at the time when you go through them, it's hell. But afterwards, when you make it, and you times where I nearly didn't make it. There are times when it was so bad that yeah, I nearly. I mean, I was in a mental health hospital for 2 months at one point because it was so bad.
Hmm.
Um, but I look back and a lot of it, in fact, all of it, I wouldn't change. I am who I am today, because of these experiences, and I love who I am today. It took a long time to get to that point where I could love myself and say those kind of things and be positive about all these things we give negative and positive definitions, but actually they just are. It's just part of life, and it's up to us to define them. And I try to own them. I know we use that term in society a lot these days, where I try to own the situations and realize that I can use them for good. I can use them to benefit my own life, these experiences, and do better in, I guess, my kindness towards people and my understanding of people, again, that can connect me to and build strong connections and friendships like we have,
Right.
And I think, moments of frustration, anger, but most of the time I manage to see it as something that it is, and it's up to me what I do with it, I guess. How about you?
I have several thoughts on the topic. I'm trying to sort them. I think the frustration and the anger with not leading the life that you wanted comes from having an ideal picture of what your life should be like. And where does that come from? I guess it comes from comparing myself to others, or the expectations that other people have for me, and realizing that, oh no, it didn't go that way, so there must be something wrong with me, or I must be a bad person. Those are thoughts that I have from time to time. And so it helps me not to compare myself to others. It helps me to get to know, when I get to know others personally and realize that everyone has difficulties and pain, and there's no use in comparing yourself. I mean, there is use in making measurements for science and becoming aware of what's going on, obviously, but thinking of yourself as less valuable than someone else because they managed to be more successful with the opposite sex, or with working, with money, just establishing themselves in certain ways that you would have liked to by a certain age.
Of course, yeah.
That's counterproductive. And so, we need to write our own stories. And mental illness is part of my story. It's not something that I'm finally waiting to finish so that I can resume my story. It is my story. And it's not all I am. It doesn't define me in every way, but it is a huge part of my life. Like you said, I try to own it.
Yeah. That's a perfect sort of conclusion to end on, I think, actually, because we, as you say, define ourselves by success of, again, big how we are with women, jobs, where it's not about that. It's we would love, it'd be nice, but it's a journey of the self, like we do with this podcast, the Who Am I? And what you say really just resonated inside me of just like, that's exactly how it is.
So I hope we could spread some hope that there is some purpose to what we go through, that it's not all bad, that it doesn't have to end bad. It has certainly given me more compassion and empathy as well. That's a big plus. Definitely. And we just don't choose what we go through in this life. So we might as well be more open and not hold ourselves to the expectations we got from somewhere. So thank you. That was a good discussion.
Yep. Thank you as well.